Um, Make sure this is on. Allow me to welcome now you all to the Middle East Institute for this event sponsored by the Institute and INDUS, our co-sponsor, for now the second event recently. Let me say that the program this afternoon is being live streamed, and the video of it will be available on our website. Also, please do silence your phones. And the format will be that the Honorable President will be delivering about 15 minutes worth of remarks. There then will be a discussion led by Raza Rumi, and I'll introduce both of them in just a moment. You know, just a moment ago, back here, I was asked, did I have any special relationship with the New York Times and the Washington Post? Because both are featuring Kashmir today. The New York Times has not only a front page photo, but inside are 3 other photos which take up an entire page. Now, this is significant because for more than 70 years now, Pakistan has been attempting to draw the world's attention to the Kashmir issue, to the dispute over the status of Kashmir. It has endeavored to do so with limited success, and when it has tried to push the issue, whether covertly or overtly, is honestly backfired. In a sense, Prime Minister Modi has handed a gift to Pakistan by bringing the issue to the fore as it has not been before this, I think. I can think of no other time, and putting India on the defensive by the very nature of it. However, the dividends from this have not been fully seen, and in some ways, as far as Pakistan is concerned, have to be somewhat disappointing. But the story is not completed. And it's to complete this, or help us understand how it is today and how it may go forward, we are honored to have with us the President of Azad Kashmir, Masood Khan. Masood is someone known to those of us who have been around Washington for a while as a familiar face. He was here, I guess, to begin with, about 20 years ago. Yeah. Went on from here to become spokesman for the Foreign Ministry, ambassador to China, permanent representative and ambassador to the United Nations, and at present time, the president of Azad Kashmir. Raza Rumi, who is our discussant, is again someone well known here in Washington as a stellar journalist and writer. He is currently the president of INDUS, and INDUS is an organization which was formed a few years ago to promote progressive causes in Pakistan and to further U.S.-Pakistan relations. And so we're delighted to have them join us on this occasion. Raza also, I should add, is currently an academic and has been for several years now at Ithaca College and Cornell University. So we, I think, have set the stage for the beginning of this event, and we will leave time at the end for your questions. We are going to have to break about 15 minutes earlier than we intended because the president does have another engagement that he has to get to after this one. So, President Khan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marvin Weinbaum, the Middle East Institute, and also your co-sponsor, INDUS, for hosting this event. And I'm privileged to speak to this audience. My initial presentation revolves around 5 points. Let me start straight away with the invasion, occupation, and colonization of the occupied territory of Jammu and Kashmir on August the 5th by Indian forces. Prior to August the 5th, India deployed additional 180,000 troops in the territory, beefed up its military presence there because already in the occupied territory there were 700,000 troops. And then they invaded the territory, reoccupied it, and started its brutalization. And they divided the territory into two parts, and they announced that from that day onward, India would establish settlements in the occupied territory, bring Hindus from all over India and settle them there so that they could reduce the Muslim majority to a minority. These are all stated intentions of the government of India under the leadership of their Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and under the leadership of the ruling party, Bharatiya Janata Party. Now, I highlight this right in the beginning to underline that all these steps that were taken by India on August the 5th were illegal, unlawful, and they violated international law, existing UN Security Council resolution, international humanitarian law, and in particular, the Fourth Geneva Convention, its additional Protocol 1, ICC statute, several Security Council resolutions, and customary international law. So that was not all. When they started their invasion, they imposed security lockdown, a communication blockade, and prolonged curfews which continue up to this day. Today is the 57th day of the occupied territory siege. Now, there is the siege. Streets by and large are empty in the valley of Kashmir and in the Muslim districts of Jammu and in Kargil. And empty streets are being patrolled by gun-toting soldiers. They are carrying multiple lethal weapons, and they are overburdened by these ammunition belts. And Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who started this reign of terror, says that he is ushering in an era of prosperity and economic development through these measures. Right now, as I speak to you, Kashmir is burning. There's a genocide going on there, and I choose the word very carefully. And after ascertaining its legal validity, there's ethnic cleansing going on there. India is committing war crimes there. Indian soldiers equipped with the draconian laws called Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the Public Safety Act are brutalizing people, and they're doing so with impunity because they have been given immunity from prosecution. There's no accountability whatsoever. There has been no accountability in the past, and under the present circumstances, you do not expect any accountability regime to be respected. Let me also add here that after this reoccupation, thousands of people in the Indian occupied Kashmir, this sounds better, have been incarcerated. Initially, the AFP gave the figure of 4,000, but I think that the number of detainees has continued to increase. My own estimate is that it must range between 20 to 30,000, because mainstream newspapers here, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, they have been reporting that all leadership of the occupied territory is under arrest, under detention. This includes former lawmakers, business persons, students, faculty, political activists, human rights defenders. You name any segment of society and their leadership is under detention. That includes leaders loyal to India, leaders of the two parties which always supported India, and these were the National Conference and the People's Democratic Party. They're all under arrest. A few days ago, an Indian non-governmental organization called Indian Federation for Women has released some figures about these detentions, and they said 13,000 young men, mostly teenagers, and some of them as young as 12, 13, and 14, have been arrested. They've been kept in temporary shelters in Srinagar and other towns, and then the bulk of them have been transported to the most notorious prison houses in northern India. These detainees are being tortured mercilessly, and this is not what I'm saying. I have learned it through the documentaries which have been prepared by international media networks, including the BBC. And I think yesterday there was a piece in the Washington Post which described the agony of some of the released prisoners. The torture is so ruthless that these detainees who have been fortunate to come out of those prison houses, they say that they would have preferred to die than to bear that torture. Waterboarding is being used, the other methods, electric shocks, beatings by rods, bamboo sticks, and cables. So it's just unbearable pain for these people. There was this one survivor who said that if suicide was allowed in his faith, he would commit suicide because he's suffering even after having been released. Now, this is the picture that I wanted to paint to you, and probably we could revert it to a little later. But let me tell you that quickly, the other 4 points. One is that we hope that the international community would intercede, and I'll define what the international community is, to stop this carnage and genocide in the Indian occupied territory. Second is that they would stop India from taking these measures which rob Kashmiris of their rights to settlement, permanent residence, education, health, and acquisition of territory. We would also appeal to the international community to clearly declare the steps taken by India on August the 5th as illegal, and they should put pressure on India to reverse them. Let me swiftly move on to another point, which is that India, of course, invaded the territory, and it has been brutalizing the people of Jammu and Kashmir, but it has also threatened to attack Azad Kashmir and quote-unquote retake it. It has also threatened to disintegrate Pakistan. And in that endeavor, it wants to use its nuclear arsenal. Then there's this rise of Hindutva, and threatening the Hindutva operatives are threatening not only the people in Kashmir and Pakistan, but Indian Muslims. They said that they want to cleanse South Asia of non-Hindus, or they call them minorities, but if there are 200 million Muslims living in India, they can't be called a minority, they are a plurality. So this new doctrine of hatred, this new philosophy reincarnating fascism, this is an existential threat, not just for the people of Kashmir, for Pakistan, but also for the people of India itself, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and other minorities. We all need to make collective efforts to stem this tide of a violent extremism masquerading as a respectable doctrine. I would say that because of the threats of India, there's a drift towards war. I was talking to a group of journalists a short while ago, and I told them that any engagement between India and Pakistan, given the tense situation, given the horrendous human rights situation in the Indian occupied territory, would not remain confined to a conventional exchange, that it could escalate to the nuclear level with all sorts of dire consequences. We should brace for that. By we, I mean not just the people of India and Pakistan and the people of Azad Kashmir and the Indian occupied Kashmir. I mean the entire world should brace for it, or prepare itself for response to such a catastrophe, because the after effects of a nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan would affect the entire globe. The last point that I want to make is that we must find ways to resolve the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, because that's the trigger, that is the casus belli for the tension, the warlike situation between India and Pakistan. And if we do not remove or address the cause, the turbulence would remain there for all times to come. So we should set up peace tables, either in the region, in Delhi or Islamabad or in Muzaffarabad or Srinagar, or in New York, where the United Nations Security Council is housed and headquartered. It is their responsibility to take an initiative to resolve this problem in accordance with its own resolutions, in accordance with the United Nations Charter. And if the previous efforts have been stalled by India, we must explore new avenues for the resolution of the dispute. So finally, let me talk about the reaction that we received after the decisions taken by India on August the 5th. Well, before August the 5th, and in fact I spoke at the Middle East Institute some time ago also. I think it was a couple of years ago, 1.5 years ago, yes. You hosted it.
I should.
But, you know, the reception here in regard to Kashmir, the human rights situation, or our solicitations to the rest of the world to find a just and definitive solution for the Jammu and Kashmir had very, very poor reception. Because people were not attentive, they would not listen to you, and probably they would confront you with the narrative that had been peddled and propagated by the Indians about the threat of terrorism. And they said that that was the issue, and not the issue of the human rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, or a just and lasting solution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. They didn't talk about the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They talked about the status quo. They would recommend formulae and proposals which would look at or explore out-of-the-box solutions, but none of this would include the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir as described by the United Nations and its own resolutions. By this time, after August the 5th, the international media, led by the American media, has given immense space to Kashmiri's narrative. They have highlighted the plight of the Kashmiris, and led by the New York Times and Washington Post, I think that the rest of the world has also sided with the Kashmiris, not with the Indians. For the first time, India is being held accountable, and its narratives are not being accepted. They are being challenged. They are being criticized. In fact, many political parties and civil society groups within India have condemned the steps that have been taken by the Modi government. Modi government is seeking endorsement from powerful governments all over the world, and that's why Narendra Modi showed up in Houston at this Howdy Modi rally, because he was seeking the endorsement not of just Mr. Donald Trump, not just the President of the United States, but the entire state of the United States, so that they would get away with murder. That's why I show up here. I mean, I have a perspective, and we are fighting this existential war for survival, for the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It's a just struggle. It's a just cause, and that's why I'm here. The very last point is that while the parliaments in Europe and our political party in the United Kingdom, several US congressmen and many senators here and the media, they have been supportive, and they've been calling for intervention of the international community to stop the carnage in Kashmir. The most powerful states in the world have been quiet and very cautious. Most of them have been tight-lipped, and their statements, even when they are supportive, they are ambivalent, they equivocate. Only 4 states have openly demanded an end to the situation in the occupied territory, and they are China, Iran, Turkey, and Malaysia. So I'll stop here, and with this appeal that our next challenge is how to break the silence of these powerful governments. Because while the streets and the streets of Brussels, or let's say London or Washington, may increasingly be with us, or even in the Arab world, official Washington or official Brussels, official London are not with us openly. So the challenge is how to break their silence and make them the right moral choice to speak up for the rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you so much for listening to me. Did I exceed the time limit?
No, you're just perfect. Raza.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Marvin, for hosting this. And on behalf of INDUS, whom I'm representing, it's a great opportunity to hear from the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, who has been witnessing what is going on ground, and has obviously far greater sources of information than many of us can ever think of. I think it was a very sort of somber view of reality, and a very dire picture that emerges, particularly if you also add in what the media are reporting, independent media, that are not partisan in this conflict between India and Pakistan, and the stories that they have come up, especially with regard to the human rights situation, deserve all the attention and discussion. Of course, the Indians have their side of the story, the Pakistanis have their side of the story, the Kashmiris have their own narrative. But I think the urgency of the matter is such that the humanitarian crisis that is brewing, particularly as the President said, for 57 days there's been a lockdown, there's been a siege of sorts with no communications, no right to movement, right to assembly, and that certainly is not only violative of the international human rights norms, but also of the Indian Constitution itself. I think this crisis has also emerged as a major challenge to India's own record as a democratic country and as a constitutional democracy, because the way this situation is brewing, threatens to undo 70 plus years of India's progress as a democracy. And I think that should be worrying for Indians, and some Indians are writing about that. But there is a larger problem, Mr. President, and I would like to highlight that to you, that both India and Pakistan consider Kashmir as a lapsed or a incomplete part of their national projects. So in Pakistan, we grew up hearing that Kashmir was a Shera god, the jugular vein of Pakistan. In India, if you look at their narratives, they call it a toot ang, or an irreplaceable limb of the Indian national body. And in all these narratives, the voice of the Kashmiri people, or what they want, somehow gets lost. Of course, now it's being highlighted because there's a humanitarian crisis and a siege. So how can we tackle that? I mean, how do we bring forth the very vital voice of the Kashmiri people in this? If there's going to be diplomacy, whether formal diplomacy or back channel diplomacy, how do we get the Kashmiris to speak up for what they also want?
Can I just add on
Please
to that?
do.
And in that connection, what do we mean by self-determination?
Yes.
What does it mean? Perhaps what doesn't it mean?
Yeah.
Please.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll take you back to 1947. In 1947, the people of Azad Kashmir, they fought a war of independence and they liberated this territory which is called Azad Kashmir. I just want to clarify that this territory was not liberated by the tribals, as it is alleged by the Indians or people who are sympathetic to India's version about the events as they unfolded in 1947. We liberated this strip of the territory, and the people of Gilgit-Baltistan liberated their area. The area of Gilgit-Baltistan is about 73,000 square kilometers, and this territory that I represent is 13,000 square kilometers. So the people of these two parts are free. Azad Kashmir means free Kashmir, and they have been enjoying their fundamental freedoms and civil liberties. We have, in Azad Kashmir, we have a separate flag, we have a separate constitution, we have a president, our prime minister, we have a bicameral legislature, we have two-tier higher judiciary. So we have all the trappings of a sovereign state. We are not a sovereign state because 4 matters have been assigned to the Federation of Pakistan, and they are defense, foreign affairs, currency, and matters related to the United Nations, or UNCIP as they are called. There was a commission which was set up by the United Nations. Why do I highlight this? Because we are free. I mean, this part of Kashmir is free. The other part has been occupied, has been brutalized, and the voices for freedom there or self-determination have been muzzled for decades. And this process started right in 1947 when India decided to occupy a chunk of the territory on October the 27th, 1947. So what I'm saying is that we've been advocating diplomacy and dialogue for resolution of this dispute. The voices of the Kashmiris have been heard. We, in fact, facilitate voices from within Kashmir to be heard in the United Nations, in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I think in the early 2000s, we used to bring these leaders, whom we call genuine or true representatives of the Kashmiris, to the Human Rights Council or to the Human Rights Commission earlier, or to different international forums. So in Azad Kashmir, there's all sorts of liberty given to dissenting voices also. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, the predominant sentiment there is pro-Pakistan, dating back to 1947, but those who demand independence, they have been given space to broadcast their point of view. And as I was talking to Mr. Weinbaum yesterday, that they can go, their party, the JKLF, is a recognized political entity in Pakistan, and its leader is free to go anywhere and talk. And in fact, they're organizing a march towards the line of control on October the 4th. So there are no curbs on their activities at all. On the other hand, on the other side, the JKLF is banned, and their leader is in Tihar jail in Delhi, and he's being tortured. So what I want to say is that yes, over the years, the aspirations of the Kashmiris or their voices have not been heard, but let me tell you that Pakistan is not responsible for that. India is responsible because India has banned their movement abroad. In this day and age, they do not give passports to these political leaders like Sayyid Ali Gilani or Mir Wais Umar Farooq or Yasin Malik. They used to allow them travel abroad in the early 2000s, but now they have banned them from doing this. Your question, what does self-determination and whether or not it has any limitations? The principle of self-determination has no limitations. It is just cogence, or the peremptory norm of international law. As it is applied to the territory of Jammu and Kashmir, you will have to go back to the United Nations Security Council resolutions. And they have given two options, because in the Independence Act, which was the foundation of the decision making when the British left South Asia, we have to go to them. So, but as I said, that there's this, I personally believe that pro-Pakistan sentiment is very strong in Azad Kashmir and in the occupied territory. But on both sides, there are these political factions and entities and parties which call for independence. I think that if you leave it to Kashmiris, they will sort out this problem. They would work it out democratically. But we would not allow India to drive any wedge between Pakistan and the people of Jammu and Kashmir under the pretext of so-called ideological differences.
Right. So, which leads me to the, following up on your remarks earlier, I think the August 5 action by the Indian government has created a major policy crisis for Pakistan, as well as the AJK government, needless to mention, in the sense that Kashmir was a bilateral dispute recognized under various agreements and covenants signed between India and Pakistan, and even its multilateral status as a dispute pending before the UN. While that remains valid, but given the act of repealing Article 370 and other changes that have been brought into effect, what options does Pakistan have actually in terms of addressing this issue? Of course, the military option or the war option is something the least preferred, or hopefully non-option in my personal view. But other than that, what are the things that Pakistani government and Pakistani policymakers can do in this situation?
Well, I would not like to respond on behalf of the government of Pakistan, because the embassy of Pakistan, or the foreign minister of Pakistan, or the prime minister of Pakistan are well placed to give that kind of response. But let me give my personal view, and let me speak on behalf of the people of Azad Kashmir. And what I can say very clearly and categorically is that the bilateral negotiations between India and Pakistan have served no purpose whatsoever. And therefore, the best course of action is to go back to the multilateral diplomacy, to the United Nations Security Council. It is United Nations Security Council's responsibility, because there's a peace and security situation in the subcontinent. There is also this situation ripe for genocide and pogroms, and therefore it is again the responsibility of the United Nations to intervene there. We should go back to the drawing board and see why the UN Security Council resolutions have not been implemented. We know why they have not been implemented. They have not been implemented because India has been obstructing them, and it has been trying to convince the world that this part of the state that they occupied back in 1947 was their integral part, as you said. It is not. Let me tell you that this chunk of the territory they had for the past 72 years, and they used brute force, and they raised their own political parties, and they gave economic incentives to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and they projected them as terrorists and militants, and they said Pakistan was sponsoring their militant activities. Nothing has worked for India. So India is obstructing any multilateral diplomatic movement on Kashmir. Now, this barrier has to be broken by the international community, and that can be done by the United Nations Security Council. It can rightfully invoke Chapter 6 or Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, which authorizes the Security Council to initiate such processes as negotiation, conciliation, arbitration, regional initiatives, the use of good officers, and so forth. So I would say that other options that we are going back to the influential parliaments of the world.
Right.
We are going to global civil society, to international human rights organizations, to the media. We're also leveraging the strengths of our diaspora community, which in their new countries have acquired political and economic clout. And we are relying on the communication portals all over the world. I think that we also have to read the Kashmiris and the people of Pakistan have to reach out to Indian civil society, like-minded Indian civil society, to create an interface in order to push realization of the right to self-determination for the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Thank you.
Let me ask, if I may. 72 years, essentially, this has been the strategy to mobilize the international community to create the pressure that would bring India to the point where it felt obliged, given its other international commitments, to do the right thing as far as Kashmir is concerned. What do you say to a very different argument, and you've already discounted, at this point at least in time, bilateralism as being ineffective? There have been very difficult issues which have, it seems, are insoluble in recent history, world history. Often, in a sense, they solve themselves over time because the adversaries change. Change in the adversaries and their relationship around other issues. It could be a common enemy. In fact, it usually is. But it could also be the fact that they find other, whether they be economic or cultural, ways in which it diminishes the sting of the controversy itself, and thereby they resolve it, not necessarily one side or the other, but they resolve it to the point where it no longer is an issue. And in this case, the Kashmiri people feel content enough whether they are part of India or Pakistan or independent. So that's an organic kind of solution, which now you could say, but there have been 70 years for this to take part. But the problem has been that India and Pakistan have been at such loggerheads that because they put Kashmir at the top of the list, and its difficulty has in effect made impossible the kind of healing that might have been taking place all this time. I think you follow where I'm coming with this.
It's a very profound point that you have made. But Kashmiris are facing this terror from India for the past 72 years. it's an everyday reality. People are being killed and maimed and tortured and disappeared, and there are arbitrary arrests, and there are these unmarked graves that have been discovered. There are half widows there. This is a wasteland, for God's sake. I mean, people have no life. And when people are killed and when these families are destroyed, the wounds never get healed. So there is some resistance, there is some armed resistance, but its scale is so small that it is insignificant. According to the statistics that were issued by the Indian security commanders last December, the number of militants would be about 250, and they're pitted against 900,000 troops. Armed to teeth. It's one of the strongest armies in the world. And the people of Jammu and Kashmir are the most unarmed people on earth. Let me also tell you, people don't realize that for the past 200 years, the actors for the Kashmiris haven't changed. As a matter of fact, first is what the Maharaja of Kashmir. It was a very, very despotic dynasty which targeted Kashmiri Muslims specifically and marginalized them. And then it was the reign of terror unleashed by India for the past 72 years. And India, in its quest to legitimize its occupation, has brutalized this population. So what I want to say is that the Kashmiris are a resilient people. If they have sustained this movement for the past 200 years, and despite being unarmed, they haven't capitulated and they have not been subjugated by India, they are not going to give up their struggle after giving a sacrifice of 500,000 people, 500,000 people, and after sacrificing the honor and dignity of their women and sacrificing their youth. I mean, I want to broadcast this message that it is the resolve of the people of Jammu and Kashmir that no matter what happens, no matter how complex the global politics is, we are going to get our freedom and liberty and self-determination under all circumstances. This message must get across that you can't treat 20 million Kashmiris as second-rate citizens or people who can be dispatched to the dustbin of history because there's this powerful nation which has its friends in high places like Washington and Brussels and London, and it can get away with murder. So there's the resolve of this people. The one thing that I want to highlight, India gives this impression repeatedly that it's a small territory and it's small people. The number of the people is 20 million and the entire state is 85,000 square miles or 222,000 square kilometers. Not a small people, not a small population, and not a small territory.
Right. So going back, I mean, taking this point further that Marvin posed about bilateralism, we know that in the past there have been efforts to come up with solutions or formulae, so the most recent one being that proposed by General Musharraf called the 4-point formula in 2007, 2006. There were back channel diplomacy undertaken, and we hear from media sources that some kind of understanding had been made, but it could not be materialized. So do you think some of those past solutions, because I mean we have to somehow move forward and find a way where this, because the lives of Kashmiris have become so difficult, I mean, and so impossible that, I mean, so are these past formulas or methods applicable in 2019 in today's age?
They are not, and they are irrelevant, I would say, because of a number of reasons. I mean, the caste has changed. This formula was worked out by Manmohan Singh and President Musharraf.
That's right.
Or their envoys, and they are no more there. They are not relative. relevant anymore. I would also say that, I mean, even if this formula had been unveiled publicly at that time, it would have been rejected by the opposition parties in both the countries.
Right.
I mean, I believe that Bharatiya Janata Party would never have accepted this formula. And on our side, in 2006, 2007, the situation became a bit fluid in Pakistan, and the opposition would have rejected President Musharraf's formula. Now, going to the substance of the formula, I would say that it would have never worked. It was prescribing the status quo or limited autonomy for the Valley of Kashmir and annexing the rest of the state either to India or to Pakistan. And that autonomy was a strange kind of autonomy because it was imposing joint control by India and Pakistan on Srinagar,
Right.
or on the Valley of Kashmir. So it would not have worked. Now, people are also talking about other solutions, the Good Friday
Yes.
model, the Good Friday Agreement model, or some of the other solutions. But I have emphasized this during this recent trip to Washington and New York, that no formula would work if you do not include Kashmiris
Correct.
in a diplomatic process to find that formula. So I have been saying this, and I have been repeating this ad nauseum, that if you are looking at some out-of-the-box solutions or third-party mediation, then always bear in mind that inside the box are the Kashmiris. So there should be no solution which does not reflect and represent the aspirations of the Kashmiri people.
There was one point in the 4 points, or at least the implication here, that part of the solution would be something called open borders, and that thereby relieving the pressure, certainly, and creating, going back to my thesis, the kind of healing that could take place when people come to the point where to go back to the way they were is unacceptable, and that therefore whatever the sovereign, because one has to imagine that the people of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, essentially who they live under as a way of authority is perhaps for the overwhelming number a matter of what their life is like. And if that life, and whether that's a good life under one or the other, some of us do have our preferences, but for the average person, it is the quality of life. And if that can be sustained, then it really, the sovereignty issue doesn't disappear, but it becomes secondary, certainly.
Not for the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay, since you are a Kashmiri, yes. I have to accept that.
They have to determine their political destiny.
Okay.
It's important for them because this is directly related to their identity. Identity as a nation, as a people. And that's why they have been giving these sacrifices. But let me also add here that in this room, I think I presume that every single individual had a hot shower, and you will have hot meals today, and you're free to go anywhere you like. You have your liberties, but I can tell you that people in Kashmir, for the past 57 days, they've been denied food and water, and they've been encaged in their own houses, and in midnight raids, these ferocious occupation soldiers kick and insult the elderly and slap women, and they say that from now on you're our property. You are, because they perceive themselves as conquerors, and they think that as conquerors they have to claim these Kashmiri women. And so what I'm saying is that they treat them as spoils of war. What I'm saying is that life is miserable for Kashmiris. So when we are talking in abstractions, we don't understand their suffering. And that's why we're appealing to the international community, to the United States. Why do I appeal to the United States? I've been talking to the congressmen and US officials, and I've been saying that, look, you were the architects of this new world order, which emerged from the ashes of the Second World War, and you are the one who led the world to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we are appealing to you that this order that was created by you, your founding fathers, after the Second World War, I call them founding fathers because they were the founding fathers of the United Nations, or the founding fathers of this new world liberal order that was created based on human rights and international law, that this is crumbling, for God's sake. And I have also emphasized that the people of Jammu and Kashmir are very much inhabitants of this planet, and they should not be singled out for genocide or ethnic cleansing. You know, I have also said to many audiences that last century, in the interwar period, while two dictators were emerging through democratic processes, one was Hitler and the other was Mussolini, the enlightened world was, or the Western world, powerful nations of the world were pacifying and appeasing these autocrats, and the result was a devastating world war. And the result was that one segment of the population in Germany was earmarked for annihilation and elimination, and they ended up in these gas chambers and concentration camps, and they were eliminated before the very eyes of the entire international community. Are Kashmiris the Jews of this century? And they would be sent to gas chambers and they would be eliminated, and the so-called civilized world would look the other way because they think that these Kashmiris are the entire population, 9.5 million people, that they are terrorists and militants and they are bad guys, that the Indians or the Hindu extremists sitting in Delhi, they are good guys and they have the license to kill them. This is what I want to highlight here. Please do not let this massacre happen. Okay. Intervene.
We have about 15 minutes.
Okay.
We have about 15 minutes left, as it turns out, and so I'll take from and we can all respond. Both of you, that is, particularly respond to these questions. All right, this gentleman here, and I'll get you here. These two. We'll start off with these two questions, and then we'll.
First of all, I want to thank the entire.
Please identify yourself and make it one question and short, please, so we can get as many questions as possible.
I am a native Kashmiri, born and brought up in Kashmir. I'm so delighted that you're talking about your motherland today. And I was wondering, Dr. Masood, do you speak Kashmiri, by the way? Can I ask you a question in Kashmiri?
Do you speak my dialect?
No, I'm not meaning any.
It's a Kashmiri dialect also. But do you speak it?
We'll confine to English because I was just thinking for a private conversation about Kashmiri. Now, the one thing I want to kind of mention, since I'm born and brought up here in Kashmir before I moved here, my brother still lives in Jammu. My relatives live in Kashmir today, Srinagar. My friends, both Hindu and Muslims, live in Kashmir. One thing I can tell you, all of you guys, the best news you can hear, that the Kashmir I'm hearing today is not the real Kashmir today. Yes, there is clampdown, but there's nobody's dying of food. There's no genocide. I have people there. I know that. I hope that's a good news to all, because every life in Kashmir is precious. Muslim life, Hindu life, Sikh life is precious. Okay. I want to mention one thing. I belong to that community who has undergone genocide and ethnic cleansing, because in 1989 and 1990, because of Islamic terrorism, I was given 36 hours, my family, to vacate their home. Kashmiri Hindu women were raped. Kashmiri Hindu guys were murdered. I'm so surprised that you're not mentioning anything about Kashmir,
No,
about that.
you've
You're
heard
not
it.
mentioning important element about Kashmir history, that ethnic cleansing happened of Kashmiri Hindus. You're not mentioning the fact that Article 370 and 35A and whole accession was signed first by the Maharaja at that time. None of these articles even existed.
I'm sorry, but you've had an
So
opportunity. And
I have a question.
Thank you for making your statement, please.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Quickly.
Can I ask a question? So I just have one question I just wanted to ask you, that you always mention that there is some colonization of India on Kashmir. Isn't this a fact that the Maharaja of that place signed the instrument accession on his own, and that time none of these articles about which there's a lot of
You're
people
making
inquiry,
another
they were
statement,
not part of
please.
it. Can you explain
Please.
to me why that is not mentioned? And also,
The
can you explain
question
to me
has been
that
noted,
why
let's-
plebiscite could not
Okay,
take place
you-
because
you-
Pakistan did not follow
We'll
the
raise
first
this
step of
question with the
withdrawing
President,
army
sir.
from that place? Can you answer this question?
Okay. Right over here, this gentleman right here.
Before I forget this,
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
you see, because
But quickly.
you raised lots of questions. I know that it was very unfortunate that in early 1990s, pundits were forced to leave the Valley of Kashmir.
Not leave, they
were Okay, forced, no.
exotic.
Okay.
Do you-
Please.
Just a minute.
Please,
Do you-
please.
Do you?
You
Just
tell a Jew that you would be subjected to gas chambers, and they tell me you were allowed to leave. The fact that I was not given choice, I was within 48 hours, I had to leave. Our women being raped.
Okay.
Are you telling me that I had choice to
Okay,
leave? I
please.
was forcibly thrown out of that place.
okay.
How could I really tolerate
You
not
asked,
leave?
you asked a question, allow the president to
Do you
respond.
want to ask a question or respond to it yourself? You can do it. I mean, if you want to do that, because you have raised the points, they are very clear, they are very compelling, and you want to repeat yourself. Repeat all the questions that you have already asked.
Okay, no.
No. Just a minute. I'm saying because you don't seem satisfied. You want to pose a question and you want to respond to it yourself.
Okay.
You don't want my answer.
But
No,
please,
then please keep quiet
please.
while I'm responding. One of the things that it was very unfortunate that in the 1990s, early 1990s, the Pandit community was forced to leave. And there were two reasons. Of course, there were these attacks against Pandits, and they were condemnable. And I would say at the same time, the governor at that time orchestrated their exodus, and it was a planned exodus. The Pandits are very much part of the fabric of Jammu and Kashmir. They are not aliens. They are an integral part of what we call Jammu and Kashmir. And they are most welcome to come back to the territory, but Indian government is stopping their rehabilitation in the valley. And I know that Pandits and Muslims, they lived peacefully for centuries and they love each other. Isn't that a reality? Okay. And when they meet outside, they do make connections. Now, this is one thing. Now, there was also this rapid fire series of questions. But what you're saying is that what I described in Kashmir is not true and what the situation is normal. Sir, I beg to disagree with you. The situation is not normal. People are being brutalized. And Kashmiris are the most brutalized people on earth. For the past 72 years, they've been victimized. And
I think you're talking about the
no,
no, I'm
please,
talking
please.
about the entire population. And your question was about the Maharaja of Kashmir. He was arm twisted into signing an instrument of accession. Let me tell you. And he also raised a point about this agreement that there was no Article 370 and there was no Article 35A. Yes, but Article 35A, all the rights mentioned there, they predate 1947. They were in fact, all the rights there were given the force of law in 1927 by the Maharaja of Kashmir. Just
actually not right.
No,
1947,
well, we can.
Article 35
Look.
was signed in 1950.
Look, this is not a.
And Article 370
You-
came into use.
just a
Maybe-
minute. This is
Hold on,
important.
another
These were
question.
events
Yes,
that happened
but
after
just
the creation
a
of
just a minute.
Kashmir to India. signed by the king of that
Again,
nation,
you just a minute. 54, it was written into the Indian Constitution, but I'm talking about the essence of these rights was recognized way back in 1927.
These provisions are Indian constitutional provisions.
Okay.
When they are in
Before India-
we're talking about.
Now, look, let's go on to the next questioner. You've had your opportunity. Go
Okay,
ahead.
okay, I'll come back to you
Yeah,
because,
okay.
you know,
Let's come back to it.
Okay. My name's Dr. Rukab Malik. I'm a Fulbright scholar at the Elliott School, GW. Thank you for coming today. I've always been a supporter of the Kashmiri people, having been born and brought up in England, although I'm not Kashmiri myself. But I'm a student of geostrategy and geopolitical issues around the world, and I'm cognizant of the immense problems that small communities around the world have.
can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, and short remarks.
Is it on?
Yeah.
नहीं on है जी जरा
So-
थोड़ा करीब करके बोल
So, much like the Kurdish community that has been thrown about from different countries and divided for centuries, in fact, and I applaud your wish to have freedom. But the problem is, given the geopolitical environment, the change and the transfer of global power to China and East Asia, for example, the rise or resurgence of Russia, the intransigence of India.
Is there a
Is
question?
there a likely?
Is
Is
there
there
a
a
question?
likely?
Is there a question?
There is. So, is there a likely outcome in this without violence?
Okay, let's get another question to the gentleman right next to you, right there, and then I'll.
I'm Peter Humphrey, an intelligence analyst and a former diplomat. I note that justifiably, the world is very upset over the treatment of Muslims in both Kashmir and Assam in India, and there's a big brouhaha brewing, and it's going to get bigger and better. Unfortunately, there's a much bigger oppression of Muslims, and that's in China. And I cannot name a nation on the face of the earth that has been more silent about that than Pakistan. Help me understand this huge hypocrisy.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
please go ahead.
Well, let me tell you that I've been in Washington and earlier in New York, and I was interacting with the members of European Parliament, and there was a British MEP who introduced a term. I was unfamiliar with it, and he called it dead catting an issue. And what is dead catting an issue? When you're talking about one issue, you put a dead cat on the table, and you divert the attention of the entire conversation or of the audience to another subject. Just a minute. So you don't dead cat the Kashmir issue. Right now we're talking about the situation in Kashmir. And one gentleman compares it to the Kurdish situation, and I would say that this is comparing apples to oranges, for God's sake, no correlation. And I mean, even if you do a scientific study, the comparison would not be apt at all. We're talking about Kashmiris. They are concentrated there. They had a state in 1947, compact geographical unit. There's a population, it is diverse, but it is known as a Kashmiri population, and it has had that identity for centuries. So don't compare it to. Now, if this session was about Xinjiang, I'd talk about Xinjiang. But right now, I'm talking about Kashmir. So please do not divert attention from the plight of the Kashmiris. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's, gal in the very rear.
So I'm Nisha Kasba. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I am a Kashmiri from India. I think as a Kashmiri, I think it's pretty appalling that on the stage right now we have, given the relationship between India and Pakistan, Pakistani diplomat and president of what is not Azad Kashmir, but Pakistan administered Kashmir, if we're going to call it what it is revering JKLF, Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front. The founder of that front was Maqbul Butt, who has killed tons of Kashmiris in Kashmir. It's not a revered political party. Yassin Malik is a known terrorist. He's not a political party. You want to say, why are they in jail? They're not in jail for no reason. They
Okay.
killed people. So
Okay.
my question is, How can we talk about Kashmir without talking about the pervasive funding hand that Pakistan has played instrumental into India's unrest, specifically to the Kashmiri people? You want to talk about what's attacking the Kashmiri people is Pakistani-funded terrorism,
Okay. Okay.
not India.
You may.
Okay, just a minute. Let me talk to you. What's your name? Nisha. Nisha? Okay. Shall I suggest you change your name? Would you change your name?
That's not relevant.
I will tell you how relevant it is. I call it Azad Kashmir. That's the name that we chose for our state. And that was the name that was chosen by our founding fathers. When you say that it is not Azad Kashmir, and I say that you are not Nisha, then it would not be relevant.
Then Kashmir is
Yes.
considered not
So what I'm saying is that Azad Kashmir was the name.
No,
Was-
no, no.
I
Well,
thi-
you
I
guys,
think- I think you-
please, please.
I'm really
please,
sorry.
Please.
Let that question be addressed.
No, sir, I don't
Just
want to
a
have you
minute.
removed.
Please address
so
the
please,
question.
quiet.
Just a minute. Don't gang up on me. What I'm trying to say here is that the bigger reality for the people of Jammu and Kashmir for the past 72 years has been India's state terrorism, not what you call is it not state terrorism when they victimize unarmed civilians?
Farake has said he went to Pakistan and was trained.
Who?
Farake, the guy who killed hundreds of Kashmiri Hindus. In Kashmir, he has been on film.
All right, no problem. What about?
I'm not saying that's bad.
Okay, let him respond.
No, just a minute. What are the occupation troops doing there? 900,000. Are they promoting economic development there? They're killing people. No. They two are related.
Okay, no. I'm sorry,
thank you.
sir. I'm going to ask you to leave if you don't.
You've made your point, sir. Please.
Okay,
Please.
Okay, let's
let
take
this question-
one last question over here, please.
Hi, my name is Huma. First of all, I just want to share my deepest condolences for the earthquake victims in Azad Kashmir and the
You wanna speak
areas
up and a little more
and
slowly.
the areas nearby. This has turned really sour. I think it is a good representation of what the situation is like between the two countries.
No, it is not.
Do you?
The two individuals have come here with the intention to blackout the issue. And that's what we stole.
So
right?
my question
So-
here, excuse me, sir. Sir, you're being disrespectful.
You're being very disrespectful.
Sir, it's
Sir,
her
can
turn.
you give me the time? You're being disrespectful right now. Thank you. So I'm not going to turn this question any more difficult than the situation has already begun. But do you think that we are past the stalemate that Pakistan and India were in for the past 70 years? And Mr. Marvin clearly stated.
Can you speak into the microphone?
So Mr. Marvin clearly stated that Modi had gifted this as a gift to Pakistan when this situation. Do you think we are going to be able to overcome the stalemate that we've been in the 70 years with this situation turning so violent?
Well, it's a very bloody gift that Mr. Modi has given to the Kashmiris and to the people of Pakistan, because he not only announced these measures, he's followed it up with a very, very heavy clampdown and crackdown. Kashmiris are being brutalized right now. So we can't call it a gift. But I would say in the realm of communication, we had a bonanza, because for years, for decades, we were struggling to put across our point of view, to portray and project the plight of the Kashmiris, and nobody was paying attention. And here is the mainstream media, which are projecting the voices of the Kashmiris more effectively than us, as a matter of fact. So this is a good environment for understanding the situation of Kashmir. But it has not opened up space for diplomacy. And that's what we want, as a matter of fact, because we do not want a war. We do not want a deterioration in the security situation in the region. We do not want a nuclear conflict happening there. What we want is that the leadership of Pakistan and India and leaders of Srinagar and Muzaffarabad, they should get together and try to find a solution. a solution that reflects the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and that the international community, particularly the Security Council, should provide and demonstrate leadership in this context. They should not try to stay away from the region because the situation is very incendiary.
Well, I'm going to have closure now.
I have one
Please
last
raise
question.
up. Yeah, please.
So
There's-
I think
there are two
picking up on the 2 points. One of the most commonly cited issue with the holding of a plebiscite, in terms of the conditions that were laid down by the United Nations, and were that the Pakistani troops should withdraw from the region, and then the Indians would withdraw the troops, and then there would be a plebiscite, or the Indians would reduce the troops. I think that's another point which is always cited as one of the things historically that has prevented the holding of a plebiscite on moving towards self-right determination. So how would you respond to that?
I think it was the last bit of your questions also. This gentleman sitting over here. So I'm thankful to you that you've asked this question. Now, this question that, yes, there was this first resolution which asked Pakistan to withdraw its troops, and then the plebiscite was to be held. Pakistan did not endorse this resolution. This was not accepted by Pakistan, but that same resolution was not accepted by India for other reasons, not on these grounds. Now, on this issue, then there was further consultation, and there was in fact mediation between the two countries, and if I recall correctly, it was led by a gentleman called McNaughton, and he came up with a formula for a proportionate reduction of troops on both sides, and he unveiled his plan in 1949. That was accepted by Pakistan, rejected by India. But later on, after further consultations, in 1952, Resolution 98 was adopted. And that resolution prescribes that troops would be reduced on both sides. The limit of troops prescribed for India was 12 to 18,000. For Azad Kashmir side, for Pakistan, it was 3 to 6,000. We said yes. India said yes, but India said, you go first, you withdraw, and we'll follow. And we said, no, thank you, we'll do so simultaneously. And on this, there was a disagreement, and therefore, the Security Council resolution's implementation did not founder on this question. There were other aspects, because this resolution was passed in 1952, and in the same year, India, through its constituent assembly, was making the occupied territory part of the Indian Union. And therefore, there are other two resolutions which you must consult. One is Resolution 91, and the other is 122. At that time, the Security Council said that any measures that would be taken by the Constituent Assembly would not be a substitute for the solution of the Jammu and Kashmir to be arrived at by a plebiscite to be held under the auspices of the United Nations.
Right. Thank you very much.
I regret that we will have to conclude now, because I know we could go on for some time. But I think we have had the benefit today of perhaps the strongest case that is being made today, not just by you, but by the American media, as this is where I started. And it is something which I think is reflective of the fact of how much work has yet to be done to resolve what is today, in many ways, the most dangerous crisis, because we're talking about two nuclear-armed countries who have this history of enmity, of belligerence, if you will, actually. And it's something that I hope we all take away with us, to recognize how it's crucial that we be thinking about this and perhaps doing something about it as well. So thank you for coming. Thank you for both President and Raza Rumi. Please.